more on how we got here. How did we get to stage 6 load shedding for only the second time in our history, the unbelievably intense power crisis that we're in at the moment? Professor Mark Swilling is at the Centre for Sustainable Transitions at the University of Stellenbosch. Professor, good afternoon to you. You said in the past we should be looking at this building as much renewable generating capacity as quickly as we can, so solar and wind plants. Why do you believe that?
Well, it's not just a belief. It's factually true that the fastest way to build new generation capacity is to build solar and wind power plants, because they can be built within 24 months. The ones that we have built have all come in on budget and on time, and are generating more capacity than they were originally designed to generate. If the alternatives are going to just take too long, by then the grid will have collapsed.
Why do you think it's not happening? I mean, as you say, solar power plants in 2 years, it can be done. It's been done in many places. Is it government policy that's stopping us? I presume it's not Eskom. They will take any volt they can get.
Yeah, Eskom, what South Africans don't realize is that Eskom is not responsible for procuring new renewable energy. So everybody expects Eskom to keep the lights on, but their hands are tied. They can only generate with the power stations that they have available to them, plus the power that they buy from the independent power producers. So it's actually government's responsibility to procure new energy, but very little has been done over the last 7-8 years to deal with what is an obvious crisis. So you ask about policy. Is it government policy? Well, actually, government policy is quite friendly to extending renewables on scale and closing down the coal-fired power stations, and that's in the integrated resource plan. But there's lots of complications and foot dragging, and the Minister of Energy still believes that there's a role for coal and nuclear, which are long-term options. They're not short-term options.
I mean, is it as simply as saying if we change the energy minister, we would get a different result? That seems unlikely. Now, I think people are sort of banging their heads against the table and asking, why are we still here after so long?
Yeah, it is a puzzlement. What I recommended some weeks ago in an op-ed, which is that we declare some kind of energy emergency that would make it possible to transfer authority for ending load shedding in 24 months to Eskom. We need some coordination mechanism to make sure that we get around all the complexities. We have the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, we have the National Energy Regulator, we have all the municipalities, we have Eskom, we have the different government departments, because you need environmental certification, etc. So it just is a kind of gridlock paralysis, which makes it extremely difficult to end load shedding. But we can do it in 24 months if we build 10 gigawatts of generation capacity, 5 gigawatts of storage. But you need a coordination mechanism, and I think Eskom is the best candidate for that.
Do we really have the capacity to do that? I mean, are we able to produce enough solar power? Are we able to produce enough solar panels, for example? Are we able to produce enough of the windmills? We'll obviously have to import some of it. There may be international constraints. Would it really be possible to do it that quickly?
It would be possible to do it that quickly. You're right. There is a constraint on solar panels. There's only one solar panel manufacturer left in South Africa, because for so long we didn't procure enough energy to justify keeping the factories open. So initially we probably are going to have to import quite a lot, but if we do it in such a way that local content requirements force innovation within the country, I think we can achieve both. But shipping costs are rocketing. Solar panel prices are also increasing. So it's not a good time to actually go for such a vast new build. But we don't actually have an option. We just have to do it.
I mean, you talk about the sort of, in a way, a sort of policy tanglement or, obstacles that are put in the way. Are people just being needlessly bureaucratic? I mean, I suppose the question I'm really asking is I don't see a statement from the Energy Minister today. I don't see a statement from the Minister of the Department of Public Enterprises, where Eskom falls. I don't see a statement from the Minister of Labour. This is partly an industrial action. I mean, maybe I've missed the statements, but I don't see them. I'm just amazed that you would think in a democracy where electricity is such a key issue, and we know how important it is to elections, you'd have half of government out trying to fix this problem.
Well, I mean, surely, the whole country got around the president and the government at the beginning of the pandemic and when we went for a shutdown. But the economic damage of the pandemic is going to pale into insignificance compared to what could happen if we move from stage 6 to stage 8 and eventually the grid crashes. If the grid crashes, we will be in darkness for 5 days at least as they try and get it back up. And imagine, nobody will be able to watch your program. No students will be able to watch my online lectures. I mean, everything stops. So that's what we're facing, and that really should trigger some kind of executive action around some kind of national energy emergency that allows the president to allocate decision-making powers to procure, to finance, to locate new generation capacity where we need it. And it can be done. But yeah, you're right. There's just a lot of political compromises and contestations that prevent it from happening.
The argument that keeps coming back in all of these debates that I've seen, and there's quite a lot of, I mean, maybe it's just me, maybe my instinct as a journalist to sort of create a fight is what leads to this. But so often it seems that we spend so much time arguing about the correct policy. People will say, renewables, as you do, I made the point in an earlier interview that my heart is sort of there. But people will say, well, their heads are with baseload and the problems around baseload, and that we need to be very careful to make sure that there is electricity even when it's dark and cold and there's no wind, for example. Is that argument, are we too busy arguing with each other?
Base load or base loadism is a way of thinking about energy generation that is appropriate to the 20th century, not the 21st century. And the reason is that if you are going to meet your energy requirements with a dozen or two large coal-fired power stations, those coal-fired power stations need to be run continuously at a certain level. And then you need to make sure that the demand is there to take the electricity that is being generated at that base load level. But when you shift technology and you move into flexible generation, variable and flexible generation, which is what solar and wind power is, then what you work out first is where's the demand, how many wind and solar power plants must you build in as close as possible to where the demand is. And basically, you just make sure that you have enough capacity to meet the demand. If the demand goes up, you build another wind farm or solar farm or two, and you put in some more storage. This is flexible. This is a flexible load approach rather than a base load approach, because the technology is different. And so the whole argument that somehow we'll be in darkness because at night because the sun goes down or the wind stops is just complete nonsense. There's grids all over the world going up 50, 60, 70%, some parts of the world 100%. And it's a combination of backup storage and variable energy spread out across large geographies, and in that way you can create a stable grid.
Professor, what happens if we just get this wrong? You talk about, a national blackout, and I know this has happened in Kenya, it's happened in other places. We come back in 5 days, but I am worried about that, but I'm a little bit more worried about a long-term kind of a lack of implementation, let me put it like that, where the situation that we have just drags on, and we end up with private people with money producing their own electricity. We will see some of these, gated communities setting up their own microgrids because that's now possible. And are we going to end up with these sort of rich, perhaps white enclaves of wealth that have electricity at night and the rest of the country is just in darkness?
I think that's a very distinctive possibility, and it's already happening on scale already. And it's also going to have a very negative impact on the coal mining industry. And you know what the Minister of Minerals and Energy does not realize is that if we had a massive solar and wind manufacturing industry in South Africa, there would be a massive increase in demand for all the minerals and metals that are required to manufacture this infrastructure, and most of that exists within South Africa. So the best thing for the mining industry, which he seems so bent on protecting, is actually a transition to renewables. So you know, it's not just keep the lights on for the rich. It's also jobs for the poor, because I suspect that the biggest impact, the hardest hit, are going to be the poorest people who are going to lose jobs on a massive scale, on an absolutely massive scale, and that is in turn going to trigger political conflict, because we're already sitting on a tinderbox, and that's going to in turn make the July insurrection last year look like a picnic.
Professor Mark Swilling, a stark warning. Thank you. Director of the Center for Sustainable Transitions at the University of Stellenbosch. I do appreciate it.